Welcome to Slammed, a Boston Celtics podcast where we cover the Boston Celtics and the rest of the NBA. I'm Meghan Ottolini from WEEI, joined as always by Esteban Bustillos of GBH and Justin Turpin, also of WEEI and Odyssey. So, guys, I want to jump right into the week that was with the Celtics because, like many basketball nerds, and I'm sure you guys feel this way too, I love the home and home series because you get a little glimpse into what could be with a playoff series. It's like a third of a playoff series where I know all the broadcasters hate it. Abby Chin last night was like, I've been in Atlanta for 6 days, enough. But the Celtics dropped 2 games this week in Atlanta to the Hawks, of course, without Trey Young. The first one looked like the script of what we've seen a lot from the Celtics team, which is ew, they blow this ridiculous lead that they have. And we're talking about clutch time issues, execution issues in the fourth quarter. Last night, I think, was really different because last night you have a game where it's 40 different lead changes. It's tied at 14 different points in the game. If they force you to overtime, that was a Hawks team that looked completely unafraid of your starting five who were back together in how many weeks? So I don't want to make a huge deal out of losing back-to-back games at the literal end of March, but I do think that this is indicative of something. So I want to throw it to you guys just for what you think of these 2 games, what this overall little mini series might represent for who the Celtics are at this point in the regular season as the playoffs are just on the horizon.
I think the thing I took away most from last night, I mean, Turpin and I were talking about this earlier. The giving up the 30-point lead is that's kind of unexcusable, regardless of what team you have out. That's tough. Last night specifically, I think the thing that I sort of took away. I know folks are going to talk a lot about the Derek White foul that I don't think was a foul late game, and that's understandable. But I think the real thing that I saw was it was like what 20 plus second chance points for Atlanta. I mean, just like
It was
offensive rebounds.
extremely lopsided.
28,
Hold on.
28
Yeah.
of second chance points. So 17 offensive rebounds.
Yeah, just
28
offensive
to
rebounds.
Boston. Boston had 11.
Yeah, I mean,
Awful.
it just kept happening. I mean, and some of that is it happens. You're just at the ball bounces at the wrong angle, goes right past you. I mean, that's tough to win, and maybe it is that Drew Holiday's first game back in however long. But that's something that you have to correct, especially this late in the season. You can't be giving up that many offensive rebounds, and the Jontay Murray shot. If he makes that shot, he makes that shot. Drew Holiday was there, but yeah, I mean, just I think offensive rebounds. That's like simple things that you can't really be doing this late in the season.
I thought the 2 games were different in the sense that the 30-point blown lead, that's inexcusable, especially when they don't have their top 7. But I think the Celtics have earned some leadway with the fact that they're just leaps and bounds ahead of the Eastern Conference. And the reality is they haven't gotten away from that mindset that they talk about all the time, where they really do, for the most part, stay focused for an entire 48 minutes. And that was really one of the only times we saw them get away from that. And last night was more like they couldn't rebound. And last night was more, I don't think they were necessarily in it last night. Like they seemed a little bit like unfocused, which is something that would like carried over from the 30-point lead, but that's something that like could create bad habits. So that's be the only problem that I'd be worried about, because the reality is like they're just experimenting right now. Like when you look at overtime and DeJounte Murray's going 3 straight possessions on an isolation with Kristaps Porzingis, and the Celtics don't adjust, like come postseason, they're going to adjust. And Joe Mazzulla talked about a post game where they purposely wanted that because it gives them more film to look at. So I think the next couple of weeks, like you're going to be discussing that, like learning is going to be the big topic, because they have this luxury that very few teams have. Like the Nuggets tonight can become the first team to clinch a playoff spot in the Western Conference. The Celtics already clinched the conference before any other team clinched a playoff spot. So they have the luxury to mess around, see what works, get it on film, and they're taking advantage of it. And I think they should.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying, and I feel like you're referring. Correct me if I'm wrong, Terp. Are you talking about the comments that Missoula had post game, where he was talking about Porzingis being in the different switches on
Yes.
defense? So yeah, he said that they were experimenting because they know that they're going to have to run through these defensive switches. Haven't had a ton of scenarios as of late to kind of rep that. and so they're using it in game. I just don't think that you really need to experiment to understand that Kristaps Porzingis on the perimeter is not a good matchup for DeJounte Murray. Like, is that an experiment? Like, I can experiment that I can drive my car off a bridge and know that it's probably not gonna be good for my car. Like, all due respect, I get it. You wanna get stuff on film, but it's like, is that something that we need to be learning in the last week of March?
Well, I think it is, because if you're gonna do it, if you're gonna, work in different wrinkles, then you're gonna want to see that on film. And what
But
better
why
time to
would you
try it
why
out?
would you I guess I'm asking, like, why would you want that wrinkle if it's a bad matchup?
Well, that was like really the first time we've really seen it. And I thought like Porzingis didn't necessarily like have bad contest on that. Like that's just Murray making shots. And it took
Right,
him.
but it takes me back to, like, last week, okay? Like, Damian we talked about this when we were in the press box, like, Damian Lillard hunting out the Porzingis and Al Horford matchups because he knows getting one of those long-legged bigs out on the perimeter is, like, it's these and I wouldn't even say I guess DeJounte Murray is kinda undersized, but it's like, does anyone really need to get on film that that's not the matchup that you want against an undersized guard?
I guess maybe the argument could be that sort of Terp's points, they know that those guards are going to hunt that matchup, right? And so why not just put him in the position purposefully? I guess to just to have those sort of live reps. Again, it ends up more or less helping contribute to a loss, but at this point, uh, you know, not that wins and losses don't matter, but it's not like they're fighting for a playoff spot. If they were a 7-8 seed, I don't think we see them doing that. So they do have some room to experiment and give Porzingis and others those sort of reps. But you're right. It's like reps are good, but this is a losing battle, at least out there. And I mean, and listen, DeJounte Murray, a career high 44 points. That was just his
Mhm.
night last night. Again, something good defense is great, but good offense will beat it every time. So what it just wasn't. It was just his night. It was just his night, and there's not much you can do about
Yeah,
that.
and I don't wanna sound like I'm just picking on Porzingis. I mean, look, like, Brown struggled with Murray late. White, I thought, was doing a pretty good job, the best out of everybody, and then he picks up that foul, late. So it's like, at some point, it's a hot shooter who's gonna be hot. It's just when you don't really have the organization on the other end to match it offensively. I thought Drew Holiday was great for offensively for a lot of the game. Unfortunate that he's the one who's stuck on defense getting shot over by DeJounte Murray at the end of the game. I don't really like, I don't know. I don't know what you do there if you're Drew Holiday. What do you guys
Nothing.
think?
No, yeah, I mean, it was as good as of a contest as you can get without fouling. Maybe you have your hand up 1 second sooner, but he was there. It wasn't like he got beat or crossed over. There's just a good shot. There's just a good shot under high pressure with defense right in your face.
And
Yeah,
overall, it took him 44 shots to get 44
Yeah.
points. That's really not that efficient. So they did a good job on him, really, except for overtime. I think he was like, what, 5 of 8 in overtime. So he shot really efficient in overtime. But part of that was because he went to Porzingis 3 straight times at the ISO. And then that last shot, Drew Holiday is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. Like, you live with that. You take that
Yeah.
matchup 9 times out of 10, like he's gonna miss that shot. And that's just he made the shot. Like that's basketball, right? There's sometimes their shooters are gonna make shots, but overall, I mean, 44 points on 44 shots isn't necessarily great. They did an all right job defending him.
No, I think it's really the overtime performance that will stick in the craw of people who are watching this game and also feeling like, as you said, that is the matchup that you want. And so there's a little feeling I think that some fans will have where they go, well, we had the best defender on the team, one of the best defenders, definitely in the Eastern Conference, on this guy. And he's so hot that, it's just, he can't even do anything. And so, like you said, there's sometimes where you're going to have to live with it. I think it's just, it feels to me, and you guys can tell me if I'm reading this wrong. And maybe this is a bad thing for this team. They just want the playoffs to start. Like, they can say that they're exercising these different ideas and that they're getting different stuff on film. I'm sure they are. I'm sure they're still crunching as much film as ever. But it's like, we talk about the dog days in February around the All Star break. I think this is the time when it's like, just really antsy, get to the playoffs. We're so over this. And sometimes you have a week like this. Does that demonstrate something about the team's mental makeup? I don't really think so. Like, I really don't.
Yeah.
I don't think that we're seeing anything that's like I always say a fatal flaw for the Celtics. I just wouldn't I push back against this sentiment of coming off of back-to-back losses against a team that is playing with desperation to be in the play-in round, and you're the best team in the NBA, that it's like, well, we're just treating this all as practice, so don't react to this. It's like it's an NBA game. These are NBA games. These are professional players. There is
Right.
a standard. There's this balance between the standard that you want them to keep, right?
Yeah, and I think something I have thought about is throughout this season as a whole, just with I think I'm not sure where the turning point was, but where when we all sort of realized like, oh wait, no, this Celtics team is like doing some historic stuff in terms of their not just winning, but how they're winning. I think we sort of started to take for granted the expectation that this is a team that will make it to the finals. Again, I think that is the expectation. But uh, when some stuff like this happens and they lose back to back, which I think this is only the third time this season they've lost back to back games. Look, that's normal for a lot of NBA teams. Now, the circumstances on which these back to back losses came, I wouldn't necessarily say as normal, and there's stuff that you need to fix. Again, particularly the 30-point loss or comeback. But like you really can't take wins for granted. And I think this season it may have spoiled some folks a little bit. And the other thing too is I think there's a lot of people, and I think we've all seen this, who are waiting for this team to fail. There is that sentiment like they can't wait to see the Celtics get to the playoffs and and they get to crunch time and something bad happens. There's a weird like Schadenfreude that people have on that. Yeah, it's so I think they still have to prove it, but also like look like these wins, you can't just take it for granted.
In years past, it has been like their mentality that has led to some of these losses, that like games that should be wins became losses. And that doesn't really happen anymore because they're a lot more focused than they have been in the past. So when you look at like these last couple games, these last 9 games, 3 weeks, there's going to be a couple in there that are easy to get up for. Obviously, Milwaukee, I think Oklahoma City's another one. You get New York mixed in there. Like you'll be able to get up for those games. But when you're seeing the fourth easiest remaining schedule in terms of strength of schedule, like some of these games are difficult to get up for, like when you're playing these losing teams and you don't really have much to play for. So I think it's just the big thing about like maintaining the habits that they've built. Like they've really established their foundation on this idea that they are going to show up every game, every night, and do whatever it takes to win. They're going to win every possession, every game, every shoot around, just win the day, that mentality. And it's brought them a long way. So it's just a matter of, kind of keeping that up to par and, making sure that doesn't slip in these final couple games, because I think that's a real possibility when you're not really playing for much. And obviously rest is going to come a factor coming down the stretch here. So really just maintaining the habits. And so that's something they got away from in the last 2 games in Atlanta.
Yeah, I'm glad you finished with that thought, like, that it's something that they got away from, that mentality, because I think that's what we're kinda talking about the same thing, like, the mentality, the standard, and making that a habit that you're keeping, 'cause we can look at a lot of the games over the last 9-game stretch, 10-game, 11-game stretch, and obviously there's a lot of load management and rest and maintenance going on, and you don't wanna read into that, but last night is a situation where you have your starting 5 back together in clutch time, and so you do wanna take advantage of those situations when you have them down the stretch. The one other thing that I wanted to bring up about this game, obviously, it's been a big topic. I've written about it. I know you guys have covered it. Terp, you've written about it in probably 1,000 takeaways after games being on site. The idea of who the ball is going to in clutch time, and I'm talking about the statistical NBA clutch time, because this is something like on our radio show that I feel like I have to define every time we talk about it.
Yeah.
Literal clutch. So 5 minutes and less. We're not talking about game 7 performance. We're not talking about back up against the wall. We're talking about, these very close games in the final minutes of the fourth. And I did think in a small way that Jaylen Brown made a bit of a case for himself last night. We always think that the ball is going to Jason Tatum, and I think Tatum has been up and down, largely down recently with a lot of his clutch execution. Not to say that that's something that's gonna go forward in the playoffs. It's just statistically what it's been over the last season. Jaylen Brown, I think, presents an interesting different look. The way that he's physical, getting into the paint, his mid-range game. It I think it's okay to have these different layers. Derek White, even at times if you work Drew Holiday or Porzingis in there. I'm wondering whether you guys think it's better for the ball to be a magnet going to Jason Tatum and having it truly in your best player's hands at the end of the game, or whether they should use this time in these clutch moments to think about these different looks that they could put in.
I think the thing that I saw in both games, I would have liked to see more of. We saw 2 times where the Celtics could have won the game, and the ball basically just stayed in one player's hand the entire time. So I think you do, as to your point, you do have those options. So why not use them? Why, and not just have one guy essentially going ISO? And it happened to Tatum, it happened to Brown, and look, I mean, they're both capable of making those shots. I think the takeaway I have from that is you have those weapons. Maybe if I know it's only a few. When you're in situations when they have a few seconds left on the clock, you got to get something up quickly, but yeah, like at least make a couple of more passes in those situations, because it is hard to guard all of those folks at once, and all those people can make shots. So yeah, I think it's more for me of like not even who has the ball last, but hey, at least like try to get it to more than one of those weapons when you have at least some time on the clock.
I think you'd be hard pressed to find many Celtics fans that like when it's just a magnet to Tatum and they just go automatic isolation. I think at this point, everybody knows when they slow down, it's not good. When they just go to the isolation, it doesn't work. And last night you saw it was a side out play. Derek White had the entry pass to Kristaps Porzingis. He knew it wasn't going to work. They tried it for Porzingis in the post. He found Jaylen, and it led to the bucket from Jaylen. And that's kind of letting the game come naturally. Like when you're dribbling out the clock, like we saw in Atlanta Monday night on the blown lead. Like when you're dribbling
Counting dribbles.
right? When we're counting dribbles, there's probably we're going to be counting losses if we keep counting dribbles. That's
Nice.
those things kind of correspond.
Poetic.
And like that's like the way I look at it is like you have to like let the game come naturally. And I thought that's what the Celtics did in overtime last night. The fourth quarter was a little bit of a different story where it wasn't as great on the execution, but like the overtime was great. And it's because they're letting the game come naturally. So I'd like to see more of that. Like you have these different outlets, like utilize them. All 5 of your starting 5 finished top 7 in all-star voting. These guys can all score. Like utilize those outlets. And then on Jason Tatum, I'm starting to wonder if it's a confidence thing. Because I don't know if you heard him post game. He's like, I'm due for one. Like he didn't seem very
He's
confident.
basically saying like the law of averages have to be in my favor at some
Which
point.
he's not wrong, I guess. But like, I wonder if it is a little bit of a confidence thing.
I wonder about that too. And look, I know that people knock Tatum a lot, and that's the position that he's in. But there's also 4 other guys a lot of the times when he's dribbling upwards to 20 times with the final seconds spinning out that are just kind of staring at him, like a bunch of sheep in a field. So there is responsibility to be passed around. I think we could probably talk like for 10 more minutes about this game, but there's a lot else going on in the league. And I
Yeah.
really want to go to TakeFlight because one of these is just so bizarre to me. And I'm very curious about where you guys think it's going. So TakeFlight is the part of our podcast, if you're joining us for the first time, where we go all around the NBA, take a larger look at things, and then also dive into some specifics with the Celtics at times. And I want to start with what in the world is happening in Minnesota. I know we have a couple topics here, but this Minnesota one is just bizarre. So Glenn Taylor announced just yesterday that both the Timberwolves and the Minnesota Lynx, the WNBA team, are no longer for sale. It says that the group, basically Mark Lowry and A-Rod, Alex Rodriguez, didn't meet their deadline for the sale. So that group, including A-Rod, were trying to become the majority owners of the team after being minority owners in the team. And now A-Rod, like, comes out, they put out their own statement saying, uh, Glenn is just having buyer's remorse, and we're awaiting approval
Crazy.
from the league. And I am looking at this as just as a complete outsider. I think it's really interesting. I think it's something that's not going to get resolved for a long time. I think that they are going to go into mediation. This might be something where, it goes on for months and months and months. Do you guys think this is a potential distraction for either of these teams? Or is it something
100%.
where for the Timberwolves, like, they got to be so locked in right now? It's really strange.
I think there's no way it can't be because everybody's going to be asking them, especially as we start getting into playoffs, who's the team owner? How do you feel about this? Do you even understand? Does anybody actually understand this? Like how like when we're talking about, yeah, I think it was like Lori and Rodriguez bought the majority stake for reported 1.5 billion. Like that's an unfathomable amount of money. Uh, uh, and it's just it seems like it's I think my favorite sort of tweet I saw about this is someone posted Bilbo Baggins when he's holding the ring in Fellowship of the Ring. Is like, why shouldn't I keep it? It's mine. But instead of the ring, it was the Timberwolves logo. um, yeah, I think it's just like Richmond's ego at this point, and it's weird to think of two American franchises as playthings, but that's kind of what it is. And yeah, I think if you're a young team, which we talked about, that the Timberwolves are more or less a pretty young team, this is a distraction. I can't see how this doesn't impact them as they head into what has the potential to be one of their best playoff series or playoffs in a long time.
I question outside of the media, like when they're getting asked questions, how much of a distraction it really is, though, because I feel like you have your intern. It's not like it's a coach, not like it's your GM, right? It's like it's your owner. Which, don't get me wrong, they are still very tied in on the day to day operations. Well, it depends on who it is. Like you look at the Red Sox, that's not quite the case. So it really, I mean, I don't know how involved the Minnesota owners are. So I think it would come down to that, but I think it is something that you can kind of tune out a little bit. Like they're going to get asked about it in the media, no doubt. And this is unprecedented. Like Megan said, like this is going to take a while to figure out. So by the time playoffs start, like this is 3 weeks from now, this could be even swept under the rug in terms of this. Like it's going to take so long that people aren't even going to be following it. People aren't really even going to care because it's going to take so long. It's going to be such a dragged out process that, like, all right, let's just focus on basketball because we got to wait for the courts. We got to wait for all this. So I question how much of a distraction it will be, especially if the owners aren't necessarily as involved in the day-to-day operations. And to be honest, I have no clue if they are. So if they are, that changes things. But I think this is something that you can kind of easily put behind you. Just focus on the internal group that you have, which starts with your coaching staff and your front office in terms of your GM. But like, I don't know, they're going to be asked about it in the media these next couple days, but I just can't imagine 3 weeks from now somebody stopping in the postseason being like, hey, like, who's your owner now? Because it's just going to be such a dragged out process.
So I do think what's really interesting at looking at this going forward is what approach Adam Silver is going to have with this entire situation. We've seen Adam Silver very much more of a, at least outwardly facing, a player friendly commissioner, very strong on player empowerment, very strong on players and social justice campaigns that they have and connecting the league to that. I think now this is way more of an ownership issue. And that's something where David Stern back in the day would just squash something or make it happen. And there wasn't a lot of
Mafia
wiggle
style.
room.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, he was. He was very much like that. And so I'm curious to see how much Adam Silver, I guess, intervenes in this entire situation. Because the other question is, I mean, I don't know much about Mark Laurie's finances. A-Rod, you look at that as the average American and you go, he's got more money than God. But again, we're talking about a $1.5 billion sale. When you talk about ownership money, you look at the ownership groups with Steve Ballmer, you look at the Suns, like an entirely different realm of wealth that we're talking about. So I think there are legitimately some things that Silver is going to have to take into consideration there. And that's why I think it's going to be a process that takes forever. Like
Yeah.
I think where the Timberwolves would get into trouble and the Lynx would get into trouble is if whatever mediation process they go into, how that might affect their ability to move on personnel down the line. But you'd have to hope that they'd have some kind of redundancy contingency plan for keeping operations as operations.
What would y'all do with $1.5 billion? That's such an incredible amount of money. Like,
Yeah.
would you just like? I feel like that's like I wouldn't even. I would just buy an island. I would just. I wouldn't be here right now. It's
Well, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
that's clear. Yeah, I probably wouldn't be in this apartment in South Boston for starters. No offense.
Buy South Boston. You would buy
I
South
would buy
Boston.
South Boston.
You
No,
buy South. It would be yours.
actually, the prices in this real estate market, I think maybe I could buy like 4 houses in South Boston if
That's
that's
fair.
it.
That's fair.
It's not the old South Boston. Let's
Yeah.
move on. So you threw this in here. I think this is a little interesting observation uh, from you, Esteban, about Delano Banton and finding a little bit of a groove with Portland. You take this over.
Yeah, I don't think I can say credit. I think other folks have noticed and observed it. But Wednesday versus the Hawks, 31 points, 9 assists, 5 rebounds, 5 threes, 13 for 23 on his field goals. So this year during his time at Boston, 2.3 points per game, and since the trade to Portland, 15.7 points per game. I mean, I think in the flashes we saw him, we're like, oh, this guy's good. But did anybody legitimately think that he could do stuff like this, 31 points in a game? That's nuts. I mean, Sarp, did you ever see anything like this from him?
I think you could see like he had talent, but when you looked at him in Boston, it was like you wouldn't expect that. Like what he's doing now, he's seemingly putting up like 30 points, like 20 plus every night, and he looks really good. And so does Lamar Stevens to that point in Memphis. And I think that's like kind of an underrated part about Brad Stevens, where he sends his guys in a position to succeed. Where, given Lamar Stevens to Memphis, he gave him a position like an increased role and gave him a chance to thrive and succeed. And same thing with Dalano Banton. So shout out to Brad Stevens on that. But when you look at Dalano in Boston, it's like he had the intangibles, like he's a 6'7" guard. He's like big dude, he's quick. And it was just like the shot was never really there. And now you're kind of seeing that. And it's cool to watch because he was a really cool dude. I had a chance to talk to him a couple times, and he was a really genuine guy. Cool story too. Was a native of Canada, moved and went to high school right in Massachusetts. So it's pretty cool for a full circle for him to be playing at TD Garden with the Celtics. But it was pretty cool to see what he's doing because it's impressive.
I also think, just to bring it back to the Celtics, it does kind of show you the depth of their bench, the depth of their talent. I don't think it's so much a case of he was underutilized or misused by the Celtics. It's just there's a lot of talent on this team
Yeah.
in front of him, and I'm glad he's going and flourishing elsewhere, but it just is a reminder of like, yeah, that some of the guys who are deep on your bench, and definitely some of the guys who are on your bench, would have careers of their own elsewhere, which kind of brings you back to where Peyton Pritchard was last year, kind of begging out of the Celtics before he found the role that he's in now, that I think is a really good role for him, and I think will continue to grow in the playoffs compared to where he was at last year.
I think it's a league-wide thing too, where like there's players like this just given the opportunity league-wide where they can really flourish, improve themselves. Because you think about it, like most teams are really going like 9, 10-man rotations right now. So a lot of those guys, you carry 15, a lot of those guys aren't getting a chance. And when they do, they get the opportunity to flourish. So I think it speaks to the impressive amount of talent in the NBA as a whole.
Definitely, definitely. All right, let's move on to our last take, which is, oh boy, like I wouldn't say that we are facing a reckoning of sports betting right now, but there are a couple of very bizarre stories coming up. Of course, the overarching one that I think is MLB is desperately trying to sweep under the rug is Shohei Ohtani, but there's a smaller scale, very strange uh, thing happening over in the NBA in our area, which is Jontay Porter. He might be better known as the brother of Michael Porter Jr. He's a two-way player for Toronto, and he got into the middle of. Honestly, I'm sorry. It looks like point shaving. Like it looks like point shaving that was discovered through DraftKings releasing all these little alerts about, oh my God, look at the biggest money winners on these
Jontay
quarter bets,
Porter. Yeah.
these two-way player bets that people are placing. And so, of course, it happens a couple times, looks extremely fishy. Do you guys think that, and to be fair, nothing's been proven, so this is all alleged. I'm just saying what it looks like. Do you guys think that, I guess in one way, this shows player prop bets are gonna be something that needs to be eradicated if we're while we continue with the legalized gambling? Or do you think that this is indicative of something more nefarious that may be happening in other parts of the NBA?
It's interesting because Turpin and I we were talking yesterday about this because Charlie Baker was actually in town. The now former governor of Massachusetts, now president of the NCAA, and he was with the attorney general and several other leaders in the sports betting regulation space here in Massachusetts, specifically talking about prop betting for NCAA players and the damages that does. And he was like, "Look, this is our athletes are getting harassed. They are it hurts the integrity of our games." And he's trying to get the states to ban prop bets on those players. And you look at stuff like this, which again we don't know. Again, these are all essentially accusations against Jontay Porter, who the fact that I don't think any real fan besides like the most hardcore Toronto person could tell you who Jontay Porter was before this week, that tells you it's a bad spot to be in. But yeah, you're right, Megan. It's like maybe we do need to look at player props, prop bets, because again, if the accusations of maybe this guy was doing this on purpose turn out to be true, that's how many others are thinking of that or have been approached to do that by fans, by people with money, maybe more money than a two-way player makes. Be like, hey,
Exactly.
we can make some more money together. It's the threat is right there.
And the league doesn't want that to happen, right? Because the gambling is part of the reason it's so lucrative. Like, especially, and I would say that like betting has probably influenced an influx of ratings as well. Cause like,
Oh, especially in the in-season tournament.
right. And like people like League Pass, right? Like, oh, let's throw on this Raptors Grizzlies game because I can throw a couple dollars on it, right? And it gives you some sort of entertainment. So the league doesn't want anything to happen with the gambling because it's a big moneymaker. But I would question, like, too, and I know it's in regards to the NCAA, but like with Charlie Baker's point regarding the prop bets, like that's something that if they are going to make changes, I think that'd be the first to go. Because I think those are the ones like this Jontay Porter, again, all speculation and all accusations right now, but like it looks pretty fishy. Like you have an eye injury that you re-aggravate 4 minutes into a game. I mean, I don't know. You never want to just speculate it, but like it seems pretty legit. It seems pretty fishy. But like I think if anything's gonna go, it's the prop bets go first. And it's
Yeah.
interesting. You hear all these players around the league. Jason Tatum talked about it. KD talked about it. There's different players talking about the league about prop bets and how like fans will yell at them and kind of like, hey, one more rebound. And I hear it all the time, like pregame, like I'll be sitting out like by the courtside, like Derek White, I need 15.5 tonight or whatever. Like they do it. They all do it. And the league doesn't want anything to happen to those. So I don't think like gambling is in itself and legalized gambling. I don't see it going anywhere, but I can see them scaling back prop bets where they're really going to might limit it to like the superstars. Like you said, like outside of hardcore Raptors fans, other than in him being Michael Porter's brother, I'm not sure many people knew who Jontay Porter was. So It's kind of funny when you see that name on the prop bet list. Like I could really see them like limiting it to like the superstars and like team's best players, guys that they know are going to play 35 minutes. And go from there. I think that's probably what we're more looking at, like maybe cutting down the prop bets, because gambling in itself is not going anywhere because it's just such a big moneymaker for the league.
Yeah, and to that point, it is all this is very funny when for the league. And we know they're investigating this, and it's similar with MLB and what's going on with Otani, of them trying to control this, manage this. When I don't think this is at the NBA level yet, but there's sports books at ballparks now, and it's so intertwined. It's I don't know if it a little hypocritical almost to be like, hey, don't do this. Except when we do it, when we get money from it, it's totally fine. But you can't do it. And again, like you have to keep the player integrity, but it is odd when the league is just literally like Scrooge McDuck money from sports betting.
Right.
But they're like, no, but you don't do it because this is wrong. It's weird. It's super weird. And like League Pass, have they started doing the that you can place bets on League Pass?
Yeah, they're gonna have like it right there. They're gonna make betting a part of League Pass. I was watching the other night and I didn't catch it, but they did say that's coming. So they're literally putting it right in your face.
Yeah, like it again, like. People are going to bet on sports whether it's legal or not. So the fact that so many states are legalizing it, that part makes sense. Maybe we went a little too quickly on just how just all encompassing it became, because it went from you can't do it at all to now the leagues are directly advertising it to you. It's been a strange turnaround, and I think something like this felt almost inevitable.
Absolutely.
And who knows? I don't think it's done.
Yeah. Well, the toothpaste is out of the tube. So they're gonna have to, that's on them to figure out what's gonna happen with that. But we'll certainly continue to follow that specific story, because as small as it is in its scope of having an effect on the NBA, I think it's important. It's indicative of some things that may be happening, or they just may be needing to be on the lookout for in the future. As you guys pointed out, sports betting just continues to expand. But that is our slammed episode for this week. Thanks for joining us, guys. As always, we'll be back with you next week as we just grind out the remainder of this regular season.